and today I'll be talking about teaching open science through blogging, and in particular through our blogging, I guess. I'm Luis, I'm a mammalogist and a macroecologist. Nowadays, I'm also working as a consulting data scientist for a healthcare startup in Mexico. And in keeping with the topic of this colloquium and in general, I want to talk about moving towards more transparency in ecological research. And as we all know, ecology is multidisciplinary. We need to work in multiple fields, and at the same time, we need to make sure that whatever we do is open and reproducible. In this two-dimensional space, which goes, I guess, from novice to expert, we'd ideally like to be somewhere up near the top right portion of the plot. Be good ecologists with decent open science knowledge, but in reality, ecologists may be all over this spectrum. But we can all learn more and we can get better at doing open science. And just like our knowledge on open science can vary, there's also a pretty broad gradient of openness and reproducibility for our outputs, for our projects, our papers, and to move towards more open research, we need to learn somewhere. So this is looking pretty broad, but we can be more specific about what we want to learn to become better open scientists. For example, these are a few things that can help define, a competent practitioner of open science. For example, being familiar with the jargon and being able to get things done. We need to be aware of software licenses, copyright issues, open access, the different protocols, where and how to archive our data, how to make our code reproducible, and so on. This is a lot of content, which again, we must learn somewhere. And open science is not something that is taught explicitly or holistically, at least in my case. But interest in open science is growing, and we all need to learn somewhere. And we can learn in a number of ways and through different training methods. And today, of all the different modes of delivery, I'll focus on online content. And within the learning materials that can be put online, I'll focus on blogging and blog posts and their role in teaching open science. So blogs or weblogs, they are a very flexible online medium where we can publish entries on various topics. And although it's not defined here, blogs can also be run by an organization or shared by multiple contributors and not just a single individual. I particularly like blogs because of their flexibility and the broad role they can play in teaching. This is from a blog itself. It's a post by Greg Wilson describing different types of documentation and suitable teaching material that can be used for either guided or self-directed learning. And I guess blogs can typically fall into any of these categories. And well, this is a very simplified scheme of how blogs can fit into learning and teaching open science concepts and methods. As an educator or a blogger, first we need to learn enough about a topic to explain it. So then this goes online for others to learn from. And usually this process is asynchronous. So for the most part, we might not know, or we might never know when someone will read a post. But thankfully, there is also potential for getting feedback from readers, which can help correct any issues or improve the content, or maybe blogging itself might be a teaching activity that students are meant to do, although I won't be talking about that today. So just as an example, Living Norway has its own blog. I was looking at it throughout the past week. It has the usual mix of content that includes little guides and tutorials, news announcements, updates. I was just going through it for fun, and in this particular post that I show here, I learned about the Living Norway R package, which, looking into it, will actually help me when I'm setting up files and folders for whenever I start my next big project. And well, I'm talking about blogging because I have a personal research page. It's pretty rudimentary, but in this one, I write about new publications when I have any, but also I try to post at least one overview guide or tutorial each month. And I've been doing this since 2015. Some of these posts are related to my work in ecology, others are just for fun or as a way to make me understand something better and to have a clear, reproducible version of something R related, saved and in full view of the public. So I usually write about using R to work with data from video games, sports, mammals, pets, and solve specific problems usually. I'm not very prolific and my page is not popular by any means, but just looking at basic analytics, it seems to receive on average about 2,000 visitors each month for the past few years. As a quick example of how blog posts can help others and ultimately permeate into more formal resources, in 2016, I believe, I wrote a brief post about good practices when we're sharing spreadsheets with colleagues or with journals in general. It was nothing groundbreaking, but over time, this informal blog post got quoted and it sort of got assimilated into more serious teaching resources, some of them for reproducible science and for open science. And also they got into the recommendations for data sharing guidelines used in a publishing group that publishes ecology and biodiversity journals. I saw this tweet a few hours ago, actually, and I wanted to include it in my presentation because even though it's not strictly related to ecology, I wanted to show it because it recognizes the value of blog posts as learning materials. And even though many of the blog posts that I write get very little attention based on my personal experience and from the findings of professional educators, I want to share some key points that can make blog posts into effective teaching tools. So in the case of many programming blogs, without knowing, they are self-contained examples of open science. Because if we want others to follow along, we need to make sure that things work, that they're reproducible, and that our readers won't get lost when they're trying to follow along. Many of these points come from a recent presentation by Alison Presmains-Hill from our studio. The link is at the bottom. And in general, she suggests breaking things up into digestible chunks, laying them out in the right order, and to always provide prompts for the reader to learn more if they're interested in the topic, what to learn next, what to do afterwards. So I guess many of us, when we blog about things related to open science, we may do one or more or all of these key points to have a good, engaging, useful post that will actually teach someone more about open science. And also the brevity and informal tone of blogs can help break down cultural or psychological barriers that people might have about open science practices. A former boss of mine once came to me asking for help about how to put data in a repository simply because he had seen a blog post saying that if you archive your data permanently, you might get more citations. So that's slowly breaking down these barriers. And this is important today because I believe that at this point, the technical or technological barriers to open science are lower than they've ever been. So it's more important to help change attitudes. And brief, sort of concise, relatable blog posts might point interested readers toward the resources they need to do more open science. So to wrap up, blogs in my opinion, can be effective education tools that help both educators and learners develop their self directed learning skills. This is even better when there is interaction and two-way communication between readers and bloggers. And in this case, feedback is especially important because, in general, it tends to lead to a positive experience. Throughout the years, I don't get that much feedback, but when I do, it's quite rewarding and motivating. And in terms of open science, I've had many people email me and they tell me that, for example, some silly post I did on PCA with R helped them with their own data, and that they will use open source software instead of proprietary software from then on. Or maybe people telling me that a particular post on good practices help people find either the confidence or the motivation to share their own code when they're writing or publishing papers. So I guess that's also a good way to influence science, which in general is why I want to end this talk by asking everyone to provide more feedback when they find something useful, or if someone's interested, start their own blog and see what happens. So feel free to contact me with any questions. And I want to thank Liz and all the organizers of this pretty cool event for having me here.